Welcome. Whoa, okay, let's figure this out. Hold on. Sorry about that, guys. I'm trying to get my phone to work here so I can see when we go live. All right, so it says you can't join, but I should be live on the stream. Here we go. You guys, I'm gonna let you guys find me first, and then we can get started. Let's hear how my sound is.
On the stream.
All right. So it says allow ministries messenger videos contacting me. Nope, we're not going to do that. All right. So how's everybody doing out there? I've got a little presentation for tonight, just some things that I've been working with that are on my mind. And it's been a while since we've done a live interaction, so I figured, hey, let's do an interaction tonight. Let's talk about wisdom. I'm going to show you some things that I worked through, how I did it, and the scientific prayer that you can use. And at the end, we'll actually do that prayer. So if you can stay through to the end, I know I might go a little bit long because, I put this stuff together as it comes to me. So it's in real time when this stuff starts happening. So I don't get a chance to perfect all this before I launch it. I just want to get the information live and then let you dissect it and let you use it. So, hey, Julian. Hey, Sabrina. Sabrina says flow. Raphael is here. Awesome. So, yeah, this is a new thing. So, I'm going to talk about what I call my personal great reset. So before I get started, one of the things that is interesting to know is that I actually had to do this today. So over the past few days, I had some error that was tempting me. I was having some really just awful sinus symptoms, really bad stuff in my sinus area. And so, instead of taking medicine, instead of doing that kind of stuff, I just went to source. I went to spirit. And I dealt with it in the way that I'm going to show you. And you can see this. I'm breathing perfectly. This is amazing. This is not something that anybody has a special, unique gift of doing. It's a divine principle. And so when you discover the divine principle, the godly idea destroys all of the error once you join with that godly idea. That's the secret to prosperity of all kinds. That's money, health, relationships. That's all of it. So I'm going to talk about some of that that's in my book, Trust. I'm going to show you some of that. I'm going to go through some Gnostic wisdom tonight. And we're going to do a prayer at the end, and we're going to come into that space so you can get into that space yourself. All right. So it looks like we're going to have a small turnout, and that's totally fine with me. People might join later. We'll see. And totally okay with that. So Allow Ministries is trying to jump in here. So anyway, let's get to the presentation. So let's change this around. So you can see here the Great Reset. I'm calling it the Great Reset because, everything has a double meaning. So, there are certain ignorant, dark forces, if you will, that are trying to have a Great Reset. But there's a real Great Reset going on, and that is, imagine what the word reset means. It means you're setting it back in its proper place. And so when you set yourself back in the proper place as the idea in the mind of God, then you get to be the radiant expression of that eternal, immutable, perfect harmony. And that harmony knows nothing unlike itself. And that's the best part about this whole idea here, is that we don't have to try to make anything happen. We're not trying to will anything into existence. All we're doing is resetting ourselves back into our proper place before we took the fall, before we became ignorant and fell from perfection. So let me get over here to this slide here and let's start going through here. So what is reality? That's the big question. What is what you call reality? Do you look at the world outside of yourself and imagine that what you hear, smell, see, taste, and touch is the truth of being? Or is there something different going on? We're going to take a look at that. Well, it is my belief that what you call the, fiction material sense of yourself is a dream inside of a simulation. The Gnostic Gospels say it's a school. So you were sent to a school so that you can learn to know and love the Father. So how are you going to learn and know and love the Father without actually some sort of performance? And we're going to talk about what that performance is. It's almost like this legal agreement, and a lot of it has to do with those words, and those words are very specific. But one of the interesting phenomenon that happened to me, and it's happened a few times, and I've been paying real particular attention to what they call lucid dreaming. I do quite a bit of lucid dreaming, and one of the ways that I do lucid dreaming is I induce it myself by putting on a talk, and I listen to it while I sleep. So there are, for instance, like the I Am Teachings of Saint Germain, the channel Giving Voice to Reason. The guy has a great voice for narrating, and it's an 8-hour program. So I will say there has been probably, I don't know, between 60 and 90 days of the past year that I have played that specific 8-hour book while I was sleeping. And interestingly enough, what happens is when you're listening to it while you're what you call awake, you can conceptualize and you go along with the storyteller's idea with memory recall. So you are fully conscious and you're putting together the pieces consciously. And so you can follow the linear timeline progression of events that way. But when you're asleep and your conscious filter is down and it's all the deep, right brain, unconscious, intuitive part of yourself, well, you dream inside a narrative where the storyline dramatizes abstract. It's right brain. It's a hallucination like lucid images. And so one of the cool things that has happened to me on many occasions is I have this complete different story. It's so abstract, but what happens is the principal idea, it seems to come from the author and it comes into the story. And even though my story looks differently, right? It's, my spiritual senses are picking up a different totality of what I would say reality is. The principal idea is still governing that reality. And that's how life works, is that God is the only author, the only mind, the only power, and the only principle of activity. And his word is governing and guiding the whole simulation. And your waking simulation, what you call awake, means you're at a funeral, okay? You're at a funeral. God's mind is still governing that and orchestrating all of it in the simulation. The Holy Spirit rules all, it says in the Gnostic Gospels. So the example is I listen to an audible book on healing, and I'm envisioning family members talking to me, being somewhere outside my normal surroundings, and the principal idea weaves itself into my, what you call my hallucination, right? So recently I'm listening to Miscellaneous writings by Mary Baker Eddy from 1883. And again, that's another 7 to 8 hour book, and I put it on and I go to sleep. And so here's what's happening. The words, okay? Now it's interesting because God called himself the Word. So watch how this works. Just see how this plays out. The Word is being carried through. It's Mary Baker. It's her words, and they're being voiced into the ether. And those words are alive, and they're carrying the fruit within them. Now, the etymology of fruit means offspring, progeny, or child. That's why the fruits of the Spirit are so important, and my whole book was about that, trust. And you see, I'm asleep, and yet my unconscious mind is listening and shaping the dream to those words. Now, what I'm literally imagining, because I wrote it down, is a scenario where Sabrina is trying to get me to do something. There's a doctor there. We're at a skating rink, and there's another girl with us. So we're having a conversation at a skating rink, and there's a doctor there. That has nothing to do with what the conceptual idea that Mary Baker Eddy was envisioning when she put her words down on paper, and the narrator's taking those words and putting them into the ether, and they're coming into my dream. However, the principal idea is shaping itself. The perceptions are shaping around the principal idea. You get that? And yet it's still not following the author's imaginings. But the principal idea is still shaping the scene. So Mary Baker Eddy states the following, and this is from Science and Health. It's her flagship book with Key to the Scriptures, page 188. Mortal existence is a dream of pain and pleasure in matter, a dream of sin, sickness, and death. And it is like the dream we have in sleep. You see, she's telling you, it is like that. You're dreaming. It's not real, because it's not his story. It's not God's story. It's your abstract thing that you're doing, right? Okay. In which everyone recognizes his condition to be wholly a state of mind. The dreams we have in sleep may seem to be as real and substantial as any waking experience, yet on awakening we see that our dreams are nothing. Our illusory night dreams, no matter how disagreeable, become of no significance whatever when we wake. Okay? Interesting. So we dream so-called awake, that means dead. You're at a wake, it's funeral. It's a consciousness of identifying with flesh and matter and bone. You're identifying with sin. So you're at a funeral, the world of the dead, in the five senses, the material senses. And so in the book of Ephesians in 5:14, King James Version, it says, "Wherefore he saith, Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light." So I'm here to tell you that when you identify with flesh and bone and matter in the world outside of you, that is the dream, that is no different than the one at night, because it's like that. You are identifying with the world of the dead. And that's why it's a death culture. And that's why the symbology everywhere, it's all death. It's in plain sight. So the Word of God is his story and the only mind, principle, law, and power. That's the only thing happening, is what God is imagining. You exist in the mind of God. God is dreaming you into existence within his perfection. We live, move, and have our being in God. It's impossible to be separate from that, which means it's impossible to be sick, it's impossible to be poor, and it's impossible to be threatened with evil. But you can dream it. Now we have to look at the way out of the dream, because that's the idea here, is you want to demonstrate the kingdom at hand, not the dream of terror or error, of night, darkness, illusion, temporal, material. So fruit means offspring, progeny, and child. And law, now get this, from the pi root means lay or lie, that which is set or established. So the great reset would mean the great putting back into divine law, because it has to do with rule and it's prescribed by authority. And there's only one authority. There's only one mind. There's only God. There is no other power, none whatsoever. So what is law? And most importantly, how does God's law set us free? from sin, sickness, disease, and death, and poverty too. Well, in Galatians 5:22 and 23, we have to look at what the fruits of the Spirit are, because we found out that fruit means the child. And if you're going to be the child of God, which means the image and likeness of God, that's the only way you can have that law established, because the law of Spirit is what sets you free from the law of sin and death. So you have to look at these fruits. You have to understand how to get the law to work for you. So the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. And it says, against such there is no law. So what that means is, if those attributes of Spirit, law, are present within me, there is no law against it. Interesting. Now, law is, in my definition, now listen to this closely. Law is the verb of thinking. It's motion by the volition in the mind of an authority. Think about that. Words from law are verbs. It means it expresses action or being, its state of being. So the law that sets you free from sin and death is the law of Spirit, which are the fruits of the Spirit, and that means the state of being is the expressed action, which means the putting of the law into application. Your state of being is putting the law into application. Now, back in the day, in the 1800s, when people were vastly more intelligent, some of the best lyrics that are ever written in the entire history of his story are the hymnals, and this is from the Christian Science hymnal 206. Now, just pay attention to these words. Just pay attention to them. O God, our Father, Mother, love, purge thou our hearts from sin, that in thy radiancy divine we may with eyes undimmed define thy will, reality. O God, our Father, Mother, truth, send forth thy light sublime, that in its pure and cleansing rays we may with thought attuned to praise behold reality. O God, our Father, Mother, life, reveal in us thy might, that henceforth we may live to thee in all our ways, reflecting thee and know reality. It says it right there. Everything you need to know right there to activate the law that sets you free from sin and death is all right there in that hymn. In fact, it's in every single one of those hymns. One of the best books you can add to your library is a Christian Science hymnal. And you read the words as a perfect prayer, because there is a syntax in the way that the grammar is put together, and it is divine. So there is only one mind, one presence, and one power, which means there can be no disease, no evil, no lack, or the beliefs of these devils. None of them. None of it exists. It's all an illusion. It's all a dream of the five material senses. And there is no law, cause, or existence of evil. None whatsoever. So human thought, opinions of little man, the flesh and bone creature that crawls the earth, that mortal, decrepit thing that you have nothing to do with because you never lived in flesh and bone and blood and all those erring pagan ideas, it's sorcery, and you never left heaven. Because when you start to set your heart on truth, just like the hymn says, I'll show you what's going to happen when we get to the end, when we actually apply it. Because we're going to apply it. We're going to use a scientific prayer. So ignorance of the Father is perceiving injustice, beholding sickness in the material body, witnessing lack in finances, experiencing a discordant relationship. Those are all erring human opinions. They have nothing to do with truth. They are unreal. They are as unreal as a mirage, okay, of water where there is no water on a, long highway, etc. They're illusions. Now, the truth that sets you free is simple. We look at the first principle idea. Now, I was listening to a autobiography of Elon Musk the other day, and I was intrigued because when he was young, he was bullied quite a bit, and he learned how to get ahead by reading books. He read the encyclopedia, he read all sorts of books, and he got really smart, and he figured out how to do what he calls first principle thinking. Now, that is very similar to what I call retroductive reasoning. So what that means is that you take something that is an absolute fact and you build up from there. So to figure out a complex problem, you take an absolute fact and build up, right? And you get out of all that complex reasonings of the devil. It's mostly just confusion. So perceiving an injustice, well, how do we use that type of thinking? God is always just because the fruit of the Spirit is goodness. And against such, there is no law, which means there's nothing else going on but goodness, period. End of story. Well, we're beholding sickness in the body, right? The material body. Well, it's unreal. Why? Because God is always intact. Because goodness is a permanent idea in the mind of God, and nothing can come against that idea. It's permanent. Witnessing lack in finances. Well, God fills every need. Divine love always has and always will meet every human need. Experiencing a discordant relationship. Well, Sabrina and I worked this out, and it's a whole chapter on it in our book. God only knows harmony. Well, what's the fruit there? Peace. Come into a place of peace and let God reveal that which is hidden within the mystery, and you'll discover that you're dreaming this all. It's all illusion. Human thought opinions create suffering again. Steps to sin consciousness. It always begins and it ends in thought because it's a thought universe. There is no material world. There's only thought. So in the Gnostic gospel of truth, we find that fear, confusion, and lack of trust, double-mindedness, and division are the 5 steps into sin, into that dream where terror shows up. Okay, the realm of terror is ignorance of the Father. It is the wicked schoolmaster, and it is also the nothingness at the same time. So another way to look at it, the material dream of error, another way to root it, how it gets rooted in thought. Remember, fear is false evidence appearing real. Well, all material evidence is false evidence because there is no material world. It's all thought. You never left heaven. So when you dream in flesh and bone and all this stuff, you're living in fear. Therefore, everything you're perceptually seeing and cognizing is all fiction. All right. So all of that contradicts the fruits of the Spirit. It's at war with goodness. It's the lawless one, right? It means it does not follow the verb of thinking of God toward his man or his manifest. That's how you know you're dreaming, because it's not following the law of God or good. So therefore, you know that it's unreal because God never created it. He never authored it. Therefore, you don't have to fear it. And so how we get caught and stuck in those conditions is usually with lustful or hateful thinking. Lust and hate. It's the state of want. It's lack. It's division. It's the end step of sin. It's division. By the time you lust for something, you've separated yourself from it and created a state of want. Remember, the verb of thinking is the activation of the law. That's the expression of being. It is the expression of being in want that puts you into sin consciousness. Want for any good thing. You are divided by putting yourself in that state or allowing that state to take precedence over what God is doing. Now we'll get into that. It's all about the fruit, bottom line. So in the book, Trust, the Most Powerful Force in the Universe, we go over Psalm 91 and I break it down. I'll start at verse 9 here. I want to read a few pages of this. Now look at this. This is what you want from wisdom, is you want the, what do I do to get what I need out of this? What do I have to do, God, to get your perfection into my world again. It says right here, because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. Okay, this is your part of the performance. This is what you have to do. You have to make the Lord your refuge and your habitation. It means where you live. You have to live in the Lord, which means you have to understand that the material and the temporal never once touches the immaterial and the permanent. So you are either spirit or you are matter, but you can never be both. And as you identify with matter and flesh and bone and blood and all of the opinions that come out of that and all of the science and all of the stuff that they create out of error, if you identify with any of it, then you're living in sin. You can't have both. It's one or the other. Now, the note here is that I said, here's a claim of performance based on trust. Because thou hast made the Lord, asserts that you are to turn within to the mighty I am presence and the living imagination, Christ. You are not concerned about the destruction at noonday, an idea that your life is not or ever was or will be in material flesh and blood. Instead, thy habitation is in the imagination as a permanent and fixed idea of God's wholeness. Imagination is wholeness. It's spirit. It's the real you. God is imagining you, therefore it is the imagination itself that is the deity, and you are in it. It is the living Christ. We all live in the body of Christ. That is the imagination, which can only reflect the fruits of the Spirit. Now, that is the truth of the volition of thinking that God is doing. And when you come into performance and agreement with those fruits of the Spirit, which means your expression of being reflects that back to God, just like the hymnal said. Remember, love and praise was there. That's your performance. So what happens is the destruction that wasteth at noonday falls out of existence, because it only exists in pockets of ignorance or a dream. The arrow that flieth by day comes as wisdom aims a fiery dart that puts all pagan sorcery and its ideas to death. Do not fear when you lay down your material life to gain your spiritual and perfect reflection of goodness, peace, love, joy, kindness, long-suffering, forbearance, meekness, and gentleness. If life is not in matter, where is it? In the expression of these spiritual qualities that are permanent. And against such there is no law or operating principle to cause any performance. Now verse 10 says, now here's the part. This is where God tells you what's going to happen. And God does not change his mind. Nothing has changed throughout all time and space. God is forever permanent. There shall no evil befall thee. It says none. No evil. Neither shall any plague come near thy dwelling. Oh, well, guess I don't have to worry about that thing going around. Guess I don't have to worry about them coming trying to do something, because no evil and no plague. It says no evil and no plague. Do I trust God or not? Well, that's with you and God. So it refers again to the fact that there is no law to sustain any idea of apparent evil or lack. Deficiency is non-existent in the mind of God. God didn't create any of that. So verse 11, for he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. So as you turn within to the mighty I am presence in the living imagination of spirit, imagination as the only life, principal activity, an expression bearing only the fruits of the Spirit, wisdom comes with God's ideas. Those are angel messengers sending the fiery dart by day to uphold his integrity. So order is the fixed arrangement of ideas that God keeps in their proper place. That's his laws operating, okay? So his divine will corrects human misunderstanding. It's a miss as it stands under a false claim of material life and the illusion therein. All right, so give me 1 second here. I just got to put a lozenge in so I can keep this talk going. All right, so let's just keep going. I'll let you guys read the rest of that book. That was the performance part. I do recommend you read the book if you're intrigued by it, because there's a lot in there. Now, here's another thing. In the Gnostic Bible, there's a book called The Song of the Poor Man, songs from the Mandean liturgy. And it says, a poor man taken far. And it says, I am a poor man from the fruit. See, this fruit, it's so important. It's everywhere. But taken from, okay? A poor man from the fruit. They took me from far away. I am far. So this is the dramatization, a human dramatization of when you are out of alignment with the fruits of the Spirit. I am a poor man whom life spoke to. I am far. The light beings took me away. They carried me here from the good to where the wicked live. That's the material 5 sense world. And the good is the spirit. Okay? The spirit that is the permanent fact, the ideas in the mind of God. They installed me in the world of the wicked, where all is malice and fire. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want to come to this awful place. See, people a long time ago, allegedly, right? Because everything's happening in the now. They understood the same dream that you experience. And they wrote about the ways out. And it's always been available for you to seize upon and claim your inheritance of the Father. All right, so let's go forward. By my strength and light, I suffer through this misery. By illumination and praise, I remain a stranger in their world. See, if you're a spirit and you're a identification of the I am presence, the reflection of that reality, that's a stranger to human thought, because guess what? I can't see your imagination. Why can't I? Because human eyes are blind. So you're a stranger in their world. I stand among the wicked like a child without a father. Like a fatherless child, an untended fruit. I hear the voice of the 7 planets. They whisper, they say among themselves, where does this alien come from? He doesn't speak like us. I didn't listen to their speech raging against me. So you can see it talks about the drama of the same experience that we have today. It's the same drama throughout all time and space. It's called ignorance of the Father. And it says here, advice for the persecuted. You came from the house of life. You came from the house of life. You came. What did you bring us? I came with you so you won't die, so your souls won't be erased. I brought life on the day of death, happiness on the day of gloom. I brought you rest. Their disquiet of the nations is not raging. Good one, you came to the true man carrying this and only this. I made him my treasurer. I made him my treasurer and the master over all I possess. I gave him the keys of truth to enter the world and leave it as a man with longing filled. My chosen ones, you looked and found again and again. My chosen ones, you looked and found as our ancestors looked. Life is victory. And where is life? It's in spirit. So you can look at that book as well. So let's talk about the scientific prayer. This is one that I particularly like. One of Mrs. Eddy's students visited a soldier whose leg was wounded and about to be amputated. He went to the hospital and sat by the man's bedside and prayed, then left. He heard a nurse shouting, and when he returned to the room, they all saw the flesh being restored to normal. When he asked how he prayed, he said, I got into the allness of God and just stayed there. So let's do the same. Let's just get into the allness of God and stay there, okay? Now, here's another part. Mrs. Eddy admonishes in Science and Health, page 495. When the illusion of sickness or sin, that's poverty as well, tempts you, How does it tempt you? It comes through your five senses. You feel it, you see it, you hear it, you smell it, you taste it, you touch it. It says here, cling steadfastly to God and his idea. And she adds, let Christian Science, instead of corporeal sense, support your understanding of being. And this understanding will supplant error with truth, replace mortality with immortality, and silence discord with harmony. So she's telling you this is what's going to happen. And it's been telling you that in all of the Bible, all of the Gnostic Gospels, everything that is holy is telling you the same thing. Understandingly clinging to God's ever-present goodness will overcome evil's seeming power. Clinging. Get this. What's that fruit of the Spirit? Goodness. She put it right there in plain sight. She said, clinging to God's ever-present goodness. Now, all sin, sickness, disease, and death is outside of the fruit of goodness, right? And goodness is the expression of being, which means the activation of a law, because law is the verb, okay? It implies action and expression of being. So whenever you are contemplating sickness and trying to find a solution, you are outside of the expression of goodness. You're not identifying with goodness. You're identifying with the ignorance. So therefore, you can't get there from there. She's saying you cling to the goodness. That's the only thing happening here. The only thing happening in all of creation is God's goodness. And you spiritualize your thought. And you bring up the erring, discordant thoughts into the realm of, well, do they align with goodness? No, then they're lies. Period. They don't exist. God didn't create them. And you fearlessly just cling to it in peace and let God fight your battles. And that's how you create a scientific prayer. She says it will overcome evil's seeming power. It will supplant the error with truth, because truth wins. And it will silence discord with harmony. Thus, through demonstration, we prove our inseparability from good. And so, that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. And I wanted to make it within a half an hour, so I kept it close. And now what I want you to do is I want you to take all of your thoughts that you've been having, and I want you to look at them closely. And I want you to look for any thought that has come through fear into hate or lust. I want to push away, attachment and aversion. I want to push away. And then I want you to stop trying to figure it out of what you're going to do, and instead reflect. I use that word very specifically, on the goodness of God. And so we can just do that right now. So go ahead and take a deep breath and just let it out. Close your eyes. Now put your attention sort of between your eyes and just look up with your eyes, but keep your eyelids closed. And you're looking through the top of your forehead. And now just contemplate your living imagination, the I am presence, as the totality of being, the wholeness of spirit, the immutable, imperturbable, perfect, always good, divine love. All the fruits of the Spirit are in that reality. That is reality. That is life, and life is victory. Now, the part that was contemplating the discord and all that is not life, and there is no intelligence or truth or anything in that position. That's the lawless one attempting you to identify with the lawless one, because material man doesn't exist. You don't exist in a material fashion form. That is the lawless one deceiving you in mesmerism. There is only one life. There is only one power. There is only one principle of activity. There's only one being. You are the child, the progeny, the fruit of that being when you reflect on those fruits. And since you're the child and the direct radiation, okay, the expression of that divine power, only that which is in that divine power can exist. And as you identify with that, it silences all else, because all else doesn't exist. And you meditate actively this way. You contemplate the perfection that is within the mind of God, that knows no evil, that has never taken on any sickness, disease, death, didn't create any of that stuff, ever, never existed. You never existed in that world. That world was a dream. And as you contemplate this, you become this. And as you become this, there's no room left over for any ignorance. You're burning ignorance out of you. You're here because you fell asleep in a state of fear. And you see, that state of is the expression or the law of. So you came under the law of sin and death. And then the dream all came because the principle was that you fell from the perfection because of your human will. That's what the story of the garden and the eating of the fruit, and all that stuff was about. And you have to come back. You have to do a great reset. You have to set yourself on the law of spirit and let that law operate through your state of being by contemplating the mind of God, the only mind, power, and presence, fearlessly. And that's between you and your Creator. I can't do it for you. You can do it, and there's no law against it. So you've got all of heaven and all of God on your side. And so now, just do it. And do it until all of that stuff that's been bothering you no longer exists in thought, because the only place it could ever take root was in human thought. And when you contemplate God's thought, human thought disappears. And that's what prosperity looks like. Is for 1 minute, you're in all of this problem state, and you got all this crap going on in your life. And then you stop trying to pursue reasoning and figure it out. That's just the dumbest thing you could ever do. And instead, you contemplate how good God is. I am absolutely not concerned about what happens, because I know that wonderful things are happening because God is all in all. And then you reflect on goodness. I just can't even comprehend how good God is, but I'm going to try. And then more and more and more, you come into alignment. And that alignment brings about the correction. And all of a sudden, the problems start to get solved because they never existed. They're actually falling away like a dream in the night, because that's what they were. And that's your journey. So with that, I'm going to sign out at the 45-minute mark. Do your work, and you're going to be rewarded. I know it. You're going to be so grateful. And always be grateful for everything God gives you. Just always be grateful. We'll see you next time.